The fridge is running, the inverter is humming, battery display says 40%. Then, nothing. Inverter drops. Loads go dark. You check the screen and it reads 40%, same as before it quit. That is not a glitch. That is the battery management system executing a controlled shutdown, and it chose to do it with nearly half the capacity still showing on the display. Here is the problem. 40% on that screen is not 40% available to you. The BMS has a discharge floor programmed into it, and when real voltage hits that floor, it cuts output, regardless of what the state of charge display claims. This video is a behavior autopsy on exactly that event, and the fix is a specific discharge floor setting, not a new battery, not a firmware rollback. Before we get there, we need to kill the wrong diagnosis first, because most owners waste weeks chasing it. So the first instinct is always the same. The battery is dead. Maybe it was never real capacity to begin with. Maybe the solar panel is underperforming, or the inverter is bleeding power somewhere it should not be. Those are not crazy guesses. They are just wrong for this specific failure pattern. Here is how you tell the difference. A truly dead battery does not wake up. Disconnect the load, wait 10 minutes, reconnect, and it stays flat. But if the battery comes back online after the load drops, or after you plug in a charger, or after the BMS resets itself, that is not a dead cell. That is a protection event. The system cut itself off deliberately and then recovered. Dead batteries do not recover. Now look at when the shutdown happens. If it triggers the moment a microwave runs, or a kettle fires up, or a motor kicks on during a cold morning. The timing is the tell. Those are high current spikes. Voltage collapses briefly under that load, the BMS reads it as a threshold breach, and it disconnects. The percentage on the display did not cause that. The percentage is an estimate derived from voltage and history. It is not a direct sensor reading. The shutdown is responding to something underneath that number. So before chasing a defective battery or a failed inverter, confirm one thing. Does the system come back after the load is removed? If yes, you have not diagnosed a failure. You have confirmed a protection system doing its job, possibly with the wrong parameters. So what is actually making that call? Not the percentage, not the display. Something else entirely. The BMS, Battery Management System. It is the referee inside the pack and it does not read estimates. It reads live data, cell voltage, pack voltage, current draw, temperature, sometimes the balance between individual cells. These are direct measurements happening in real time, and the BMS is watching every one of them against hard limits. State of charge, the percentage on your screen, is a calculation. It is derived from voltage curves, charge history, and sometimes current integration. It is useful. It is not precise. And when conditions change fast, it lags behind reality. The BMS does not lag. The moment one cell in that pack sags toward its protection floor, the circuit opens. Not when the average looks bad, when that one cell hits the line. Here is the contrast that matters. Your display says 40% remaining, estimated fuel in the tank. Meanwhile, one cell in the pack is sagging under load, already near its minimum voltage threshold. The BMS does not care what the screen says. It sees a real number crossing a real limit, and it disconnects. That is why 40% feels like zero. It is not the pack running dry. It is the referee blowing the whistle on one weak cell dragging the rest toward damage. Which raises the obvious question, why is that protection line getting triggered at 40% instead of near empty? That gap should not exist, but it does. And the reason is more specific than most people expect. 4 reasons that gap exists, and they compound each other. First, voltage sag under load. When your inverter demands a surge of current, terminal voltage drops fast. A battery sitting at rest can look perfectly healthy. The moment real load hits, voltage collapses. The BMS is measuring that live terminal voltage, not the resting number. If it sags past the cutoff threshold during a draw, the circuit opens. Does not matter what the display showed 2 seconds ago. Second, cell imbalance. A pack is only as strong as its weakest cell. The overall voltage might average out to 40% remaining, but one degraded cell inside that pack is already at the floor. The BMS disconnects the entire pack to protect that one cell. The other cells could keep going. They do not get the chance. Third, state of charge drift. The percentage on your screen is calculated, not measured. Shallow cycling, missed full charges, and long periods without a proper calibration pass all allow that calculation to drift. The display becomes confidently wrong. It shows 40% while the actual usable charge is lower. You trust the number. The BMS ignores it. Fourth, temperature and aging. Cold cells have higher internal resistance. Old cells do too. Higher resistance means worse sag under the same load. The same current draw that caused no problem in summer will trip protection in winter. A 2-year-old pack trips earlier than a new one under identical conditions. These four do not take turns. They stack. Cold weather plus 1 weak cell plus a drifted state of charge estimate plus a heavy inverter load. Any one of them moves the trigger point earlier. All four together, and 40% is not a surprise. It is almost predictable, so all four of those forces stack against you. The fix is not complicated, but most people never find it because they are looking in the wrong menu. The setting is called different things depending on your hardware. Minimum state of charge, battery reserve, backup reserve, discharge floor. On voltage-based inverters and charge controllers, it shows up as low voltage cutoff or discharge stop voltage. Different labels. Same function. It tells the system where to stop draining the battery on purpose. That word matters. On purpose. This setting is supposed to stop the inverter or energy management system before the battery management system is forced to intervene. The BMS disconnect is an emergency brake. The discharge floor is a speed limit. You want the speed limit doing the work, not the emergency brake. Here is what it actually saves, not hidden capacity. The battery does not suddenly have more power because you changed a number. What you are saving is battery health over time, system stability under load, and your backup reserve if the grid goes down. You are also eliminating the nuisance shutdowns that happen because the system ran too deep into the sag zone, which brings it back to the 40% problem. If your battery is tripping at a displayed 40%, the instinct is to lower the reserve so it can go deeper. That is the wrong move. Going deeper pushes the system further into the zone where voltage sag, cell imbalance, and state of charge drift already create the conditions for a crash. Raising the discharge floor keeps the system above that zone. The shutdowns stop not because the battery got better, but because you stopped asking it to operate where it was always going to fail. Raising the discharge floor is the right direction, but the number you pick matters, and picking it wrong in either direction still causes problems. Start with a simple diagnostic. Note the load size when shutdown happens, the battery voltage under that load, the displayed state of charge at the moment of cutoff, and whether the battery recovers normally after you remove the load or finish a charge cycle. Those 4 observations tell you almost everything. If shutdown only happens under heavy loads, the problem is voltage sag under peak draw. Your options are to reduce those peak loads, stagger them, or raise the discharge floor enough that the battery enters that high draw moment with more buffer above the sag zone. If shutdown happens at light load, that is a different problem entirely. That pattern points toward calibration drift, cell imbalance, or a genuinely weak cell group. Raising the floor helps, but it does not fix bad cells. That is a warranty conversation, not a settings conversation. The trade-off is real and worth saying plainly. A higher reserve floor means more stability, less stress on the cells, and longer usable life over years. It also means less capacity available on any given day. A lower floor looks like more capacity right up until the BMS hard cuts the system anyway. And that hard cut is exactly what you were trying to avoid. There are also hard limits you do not cross. Do not set your inverter cutoff below the battery manufacturer's published minimum discharge voltage. Do not attempt to bypass or override the BMS. Check your manual and your warranty terms before touching any protected threshold, because some systems void coverage the moment you modify those parameters. The setting exists to protect the battery from you. Use it that way. So now you have a number dialed in. Here is how you confirm whether it actually worked. Fully charge the battery. Apply a moderate, steady load. Something you run regularly, not a spike load. Log the state of charge and voltage every few minutes until the system stops drawing from the battery. Write down where it stopped, how it stopped, and whether anything abruptly cut out. Then raise the discharge floor by 10 to 15% above where you previously saw cutoff, and run the same load again. What you are looking for is a graceful handoff. The inverter stops pulling from the battery earlier, a usable reserve remains, and nothing collapses. That is the setting doing exactly what it is supposed to do. But here is where it gets important. If the system still shuts down hard, well above your new floor. The setting is not the problem. Something underneath it is. A cell group collapsing early under load, a calibration error making the displayed percentage meaningless, or a pack that is genuinely undersized for the loads you are running. The setting did not cause that. It exposed it. That distinction matters because one of those is a configuration fix and the other is a warranty call. The deeper shift here is this. Stop treating battery percentage as a reliable readout. It is an estimate built on voltage curves, temperature compensation, and calibration history. When a system shuts off at 40%, the percentage was never the true story. Voltage under load was. That is what the test actually measures. The percentage is not the measurement. It is the interpretation, and as you have seen, the interpretation can be wrong by 30% before anything flags an error. Here is the actual model to carry forward. The BMS holds a hard voltage floor. The inverter holds a separate cutoff. Your reserve setting sits above both. When those three numbers are not coordinated, the system picks the most conservative one under load, and that is where your battery stops, regardless of what the display says. So use the setting. Find the discharge floor, the minimum SOC, whatever your manufacturer calls it, and park it high enough that a graceful handoff happens before the protection layer fires. That gap is your real usable range. Before you change any limit, read the manual for your specific battery and inverter combination. Then check your own shutdown percentage under a steady load. If you want a more targeted answer, drop your battery model and inverter model in the comments. That pairing matters more than the general advice. If this video clarified something your installer never explained, subscribe. More of this coming.